good evening, and welcome to After These Messages, a new series where we take a look at the adverts from days gone by and see what kind of impact they can have on us still today. Will they make us smile, laugh, cringe, maybe even cry? Well, that's what we're going to find out. And for our first episode, we'll be taking a look at a selection of adverts from Hamlet, the mild cigar. Launched in the UK in 1964, Hamlet Cigars would dominate television adverts for the next few decades, known for being deliberately vague in their plots until the signature tune, Air on a G-string, plays, and the characters decide to spark up and have one of the titular cigars. So that's the basic premise of our advertisements today, so let's have a look at our first one, Music Teacher.
Happiness is a cigar called Hamlet, the mild cigar from Benson and Hedges.
An assault on the ears to kick things off. A music student who can't really play the piano properly and a disgruntled teacher by his side. But wait, once he sparks up that Hamlet cigar, it sounds like the boy is playing perfectly. If only things like that worked in real life, eh? It's so novel to see these really old black and white TV ads from the 1960s. Just little details like seeing how much a pack of Hamlets would have cost back in 1966 shows how different things were back then. It's one of the few ads that has this grand piano arrangement of Air on a G-string as well, the more common recording you'll hear as we go on. Speaking of going on, here's our next Hamlet ad for the day, Launderette.
Happiness is a cigar called Hamlet, the mild cigar from Benson and Hedges.
Okay, this one is just odd, even for Hamlet. We see a man enter a laundrette and begin to throw his clothes into the washer, seemingly nearly all of his clothes. The women look on in shock, but after he grabs his Hamlets and lights one up, seemingly nothing much changes? I couldn't really see if his clothing had changed much. I mean, it looks like it has, but I can't be sure. And it's not like the women have gone back to what they were doing, they're still oogling away at him. So in my view, this advert isn't that good because its focus of main reveal, whatever it's meant to be, just seems very vague and not clear whatsoever. But never mind, for the 1970s were right around the corner, and with it came the debut of colour TV adverts for the mild cigar, like this next one, Venus de Milo.
Happiness is a cigar called Hamlet, the mild cigar from Benson and Hedges.
Little bit of a historical ad for the British viewers. We see an artist sculpt what is eventually to be the famous Venus de Milo statue. As he accidentally lops off one of her arms, he takes a break to have one of his Hamlet cigars, which of course they definitely had back then in ancient Greece. I like how we don't see him continue, because of course the Venus de Milo has no arms, that's the whole novelty of the statue. But look at that smug grin he has on his face after a puff on his cigar. He knows he's going to knock the other arm off. And the funny thing is, from this one look, we all know he is too. It's subtle but a very clever tactic to conclude the advert. Now let's look at a Hamlet ad that debuted just 1 year after this one. Tennis.
Happiness is a cigar called Hamlet, the mild cigar.
So here we see the more classic Hamlet formula. Now for the first 2/3 of this ad before the Hamlet package is shown, you would have realistically no idea what this is advertising, but this is what Hamlet did so well. Before revealing themselves to an audience, they would win over their intrigue, their curiosity as to what was going to be shown to them on their screens. This poor guy can't enjoy the final moments of a tense tennis match due to him being in a neck brace. You should have just watched it on the telly, mate. But don't worry, as soon as he quite slickly throws his cigar into his mouth and lights up, he sits back with a smile on his face. I mean, for me, I would be more bothered that I can't enjoy the match, but hey, apparently happiness is a cigar called Hamlet. And the look on this guy's face says exactly that. So what do we have next in the 1970s? We have Robot. Oh gee, I wonder what film inspired this ad. Right from seeing the golden robots, it feels quite clear that this may have been somewhat inspired by the biggest film of that year, Star Wars, and specifically C-3PO. As we see the production line scroll down, we see one of the robot's panels lift to reveal, what else, some Hamlet cigars, and then we're graced with the sight of seeing a C-3PO knockoff take a puff while speaking to us in the most 70s sounding robot voice ever. It's not Hamlet's best in my view, and on one hand in hindsight, to me it just feels like they were trying to build upon the whole Star Wars sci-fi boom, but hey, who wasn't at that time back in 1977? Moving onwards, the following year is 1978, and Hamlet would move away from the sci-fi and more into the realm of fantasy and humour, with Cowboy.
Happiness is a cigar called Hamlet, the mild cigar from Benson and Hedges.
Now I actually quite like this one's concept. We see a cowboy approach the pearly gates of heaven, presumably having died from some sort of classic western gunfighting duel. And after inspecting the list, however, the angel at the gate denies him entry. But it's alright, the mad dog has his Hamlet cigars, and with the lovely harp arrangement of Air on a G-string playing in the background, it makes his denial into heaven that much more relaxing. Again, where I think this one has the biggest strength is the brilliant comedy behind a cowboy not being allowed into heaven. Because let's face it, we don't need to be told why he's being denied. We can probably guess, and failing that, it can be totally left up to the viewer's imagination. The following year, we came down from heaven to the green fields of a golf course, with Bunker.
Happiness is a cigar called Hamlet, the mild cigar from Benson and Hedges.
Now this, ladies and gentlemen, is really how you do a TV advert on the cheap. On hole 13, the typically unlucky number, we see the actions of a frustrated golfer unable to get his way out of the sandy bunker. But he stops to light up and suddenly all is calmer. For how simple and cheap this is, I do like the fact we never actually see this golfer, communicating his actions and emotions through other symbols such as the frantic swinging of the golf club and the smoke emitting from the cigar. Very bare bones indeed, but I can see why it worked. But now we must move forward into the 1980s, and we shall start by taking a look at our next ad, Car Wash.
Happiness is a cigar called Hamlet, the mild cigar.
Okay, there is no way they didn't know how daft this one was. I mean, I get the humour behind it all. A man's window lever breaks as he's going through the car wash. The inside of his car is going to get essentially soaked. But of course, a Hamlet cigar will ease all that stress, don't you worry. Now, not only is smoking in general not recommended, but smoking in your car whilst going through a car wash with an open window is surely just a waste of a cigar in the first place. Not one of their greatest hits for me. I mean, the humour's there, but the concept is just a bit too laughable and daft for me to get behind. Now for our next 80s Hamlet ad, we have the strangely titled Pink Shiny Dome.
Happiness is a cigar called Hamlet, the mild cigar.
Ah, now the title makes a little more sense. Again, like some of the others, the setup of this one before the presence of any Hamlet iconography just grabs you and makes you think, what on earth is this advertising? If there's any of these ads that tries to emphasise that happiness can be easily obtained from one of their cigars, then this is it. That even in the most awkward of circumstances, Hamlet cigars almost seem to whisk people away into a world of their own, devoid of stress, or of embarrassment, or practically any negative emotion. But now we'll have a look at one of the most recognisable Hamlet ads, for this is Photo Booth.
Happiness is a cigar called Hamlet, the mild cigar.
So I find this one both creepy and hilarious. The fact we have this man in an enclosed space, no background music, him sorting out his quite frankly ridiculous hairdo, just gives an air of uncomfortableness, but hey, that's just me. I do find it hilarious that any time he makes a slight move he misses the camera taking his picture, because not only is this the comedy from the actor being well timed and expressed, but it's also a very relatable situation. I'm sure many of us have paid the daft prices that photo booths demand and yet miss all the crucial moments when it decides to take our pictures. Of course, at the very end he does get his picture, albeit just his head, but he only makes it because, well, what else, he's had a puff on one of those Hamlets. After 2 decades at this point, it was a tried and true concept model for Hamlet ads, but it seems the British public still took them to heart greatly. But moving on now out of the 80s and into the 1990s, with this advert titled Wall.
Happiness is a cigar called Hamlet, the mild cigar.
You can tell how bizarre they wanted to go with their humour, can't you? So we have a line of footballers all covering their crotches, something I'm pretty sure regular footballers don't do. But as we see the striker kick and the ball unnaturally swings to round the net, it bounces off the post to strike an unlucky player right where it hurts the most. And as he's carried off a stretcher, he takes a puff of Hamlet. And by the look on his face, seemingly all the private pain has been whisked away. Trust me mate, it'll come back and hit you hard. It always does. Now this ad is quite funny, if a little corny by today's standards, by involving obvious genital humour, But hey, considering it's advertising cigars, you would never guess that until the last few seconds. Now before our next one, I wanted to note something. Around 1991, companies were banned from advertising smoking or any tobacco products on television in the UK. So one advertising avenue that was still open to Hamlet, however, was the cinema. And our final few ads of the day all originated on the big screen, including this one from 1996, Hangman.
Happiness is a cigar called Hamlet.
Clever on one hand, a bit daft in the other. Now right from the get-go it's very clear we're seeing a game of Hangman, and the direction has made a good effort to mask the phrase we are spelling out as much as possible before the truth is revealed. One thing I don't like, however, is all the cartoony and cliched sound effects. They honestly just come off as super irritating, and you could have implanted so much better and much more meaningful sounds relating to what's actually happening on the screen. And once more, the happiness Hamlet brings apparently even circumvents this cartoon character's hanging, so it's actually a bit dark. But considering now these adverts could only be shown on 18+ films, I suppose there's no harm in making things a little darker for a much more reduced, but much more mature audience. And now we're taking a very weird and unexpected turn, folks, so get ready, for this is Glowworm.
Hi, babes.
Oh, hi.
Oh, you're in bed already?
Yeah.
Well, all right. Leave the light off. I've got a surprise for you.
I bet you haven't seen one of these before.
A luminous condom. No.
What are all these clothes doing on the floor? Oh, sodding wardrobe. Hold on a minute. What's going on? Here.
Hamlet extra mild. For extra happiness.
Well, thank God we didn't have to see that with the lights on. Seriously though, what the hell is this advert? Did they really just sit in a boardroom and think, yeah lads, so basically we can't really advertise properly anymore, so let's just have luminous condoms and insinuate that a woman has been a horse? Wow, that's all I can say. I mean, right until the last few seconds, there is no way in hell you would ever connect this to being a Hamlet advert, and this is repulsively weird even for their standards. Maybe not the most dignified way to begin the closing of their advertising, and I mean, yes, it is funny, but it's definitely not for any of the right reasons. But we have now come to our final advert of the day, which is also the final advert that was ever aired by Hamlet. It's aptly titled, Farewell.
Boom, 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 boom.
La 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 la.
Oh, hello. Oh.
Say what you will about the smoking industry, but this has clearly been made with fondness. Now, I don't like smoking, at all. I don't judge people who do, but I think the dangers and consequences of it are horrific. But this fine lad from Hamlet shows the core of what all its advertising essentially did for the past 3 decades. It shows people in dire or uncomfortable situations and how having some signature mild cigars could help make all that disappear. I also like how the signature tagline has been altered for this finale, saying that happiness has always been Hamlet. Perhaps a subtle thank you to their millions of customers who bought these things over the years. Also, it's such a small detail, but I do like when it cuts out at the very end to say film end with the smoking warning. A stark reminder, thankfully, of the kinds of damages smoking can do to us. Overall, Hamlet Cigars seemingly pulled out every scenario in the book for their advertisements over the course of 30 years, embracing every kind of style, of scenario, and of humour, all to get across that apparently having a few puffs on these cigars would lead to instant happiness. I promise I doubt, but hey, I'm just one opinion. But I hope you've all enjoyed our first episode of After These Messages, and if anything, that they brought back some nostalgia for those of you who remember seeing them when they first went out. And for those of you who are new to these, I hope they've provided an insight as to what was different for people back then, as well as their advertising. Please leave a like, a comment, share the video, subscribe to the channel with notifications on, donate to the Patreon if you like, and until the next one, we shall see you all.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
Good night.